Joining us now is Matt Bennett, co-founder of Third Way and former Deputy Assistant for Intergovernmental Affairs for President Bill Clinton. Matt, it's always good to get you on the show. Taking out this minimum wage now, does that make it faster and easier to pass a larger bill?
Yeah, there's no question about it. Not only was there the question of whether it was going to work procedurally, which it isn't, but there are at least two Democrats who have expressed concern about the minimum wage hike, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema in the Senate. And obviously, there isn't a single Democratic vote to spare there because so far the Republicans are uniformly opposed to this bill. So now that it's out, it's likely that it can get all 50 Democratic senators and Kamala Harris, and it should pass.
Matt, are there any alternatives to the minimum wage that would achieve roughly the same objective? Is there any other political kind of route here? Well,
it's just been reported that Bernie Sanders, who's the chairman of the Budget Committee, and Ron Wyden, who's the chairman, who is another powerful chairman, and Chuck Schumer, who's the majority leader, have been discussing adding a provision that would take tax benefits away from large companies. It's not clear exactly how that will be defined, who don't pay their workers at least $15 an hour. It is possible that that would survive the procedural steps that the minimum wage didn't, and that could be kind of a backdoor way of getting a higher minimum wage for at least the workers at those large companies.
We're just getting some news that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is weighing adding a tax penalty to the COVID bill, looking at a penalty for large companies that pay under $15, as you were just mentioning. I'm wondering if the best use of Biden's capital is getting something done quickly and saying to the progressives, look, guys, they didn't let me do it, let's just get it done, versus digging in your heels to sort of help the progressives continue to make hay.
Yeah, I think it is the best use of his political capital to move the pandemic bill as quickly as possible. The pandemic bill responds to a pressing national emergency. On March 14th, the extended unemployment benefits run out, and we cannot allow that to happen. That would be a catastrophe for millions of Americans. And so because this is a very complex and difficult procedural dance that they have to do to pass this kind of bill, they don't have any time to spare. So I think overwhelmingly the view in the White House and among most Democrats is get this bill done. And we will have to grapple with the minimum wage. It's outrageously low. People work full time and still live in poverty, which is insane. But it probably won't happen on this bill.
Matt, what do you think the final number looks like?
I think it looks a lot like 1.9 trillion, which is what the House bill costs roughly, and what is likely to be the final number in the Senate bill.
Matt, I'm wondering how you look at what's priced in, because I know you're not a market guy, but in the market, Bank of America said that $3 trillion stimulus was already priced in, 1.5% on the 10-year yield. Do you get the feeling that we're out over our skis here?
Well, I think what they meant was $3 trillion over the two budget reconciliation bills that we're likely to see this year. One of them should pass in the next week or two, and the other will pass in the summer. That one will also be a very, very large bill that will move Biden's big infrastructure and climate initiatives. And his climate initiatives are a lot about creating jobs with spending. So they're going to be expensive. I don't think that this is unwarranted. I think it's manageable. There's a lot of deficit spending in here, but that's been true for the last 6 presidencies, and we'll have to grapple with that at some time, but not in the middle of 3 crises like we are now.
Matt, can I just ask you a technical question about the way that government is working at the moment? And I want to bring the Fed in here. Everybody's trying to understand what is going to happen on the fiscal front, and that surely is going to shape the way that the Fed thinks about what it's going to do next. How interconnected is this process? We've got a former Fed chair who's now Treasury Secretary. How connected do you think she is to the Fed at this point in time? How intertwined do you think the thinking is?
I would guess, and this is not my area, but I would guess it's pretty intertwined. As you noted, Janet Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury, was the Fed chair. She is obviously deeply familiar to and familiar with the Fed board. I would guess that she's talking to the chairman pretty much every day. And what happened during the crisis in 2008 and 9 is that the Fed worked hour by hour with Treasury and with the Bush and then the Obama administrations to grapple with the crisis. I'll bet that's happening again. And obviously, when we're talking about spending many trillions of dollars in these bills, that has huge implications for the Fed. So I'm guessing there's a lot of work being done together.
Just on a procedural basis, so the House will pass today. Then what happens as the Senate is still going over some of these red lines? Right.
So the House votes today. There will be changes, very likely, in the Senate bill. And so it has to kind of ping pong back and forth. In the old days, they would have a conference committee where senators and House members from the relevant committees would get together and hammer out the details and then bring identical bills back to the two chambers. Those are remnants of the past, unfortunately. It doesn't really work that way anymore. So now they ping pong bills back and forth. A bill will pass the House, goes to the Senate, it changes, goes back to the House. And everyone knows the deadline is March 14th. So my guess is Joe Biden will be signing this bill at 11:42 on the evening of March 13th.
In terms of you've got your ear to the ground. In terms of current thinking in Washington, is there an assessment that maybe this is too much? I'm just wondering, you probably talk to a lot of people, and I'm just wondering anecdotally what the sense is here. The last couple of days, we've seen financial markets going haywire. Yields are shooting up sharply. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. Like, it may or may not have been a reflation trade, but nevertheless, there is this kind of growing momentum within financial markets that this process of recovery is accelerating and maybe ahead of kind of where a lot of people thought it was. How does that change the thinking in Washington?
Not much. I mean, I think it has become a central Republican talking point about the size of this bill. They think it's too much. And, you know, of course, they started talking about deficits again at noon on January 20th when we had a Democratic president replace a Republican president. That's when they begin to be actively involved in deficit discussions. Before that, you didn't hear a peep when they were passing trillions in tax cuts. So I do think that there's plenty of Republicans and there are some nonpartisan economists who are beginning to worry about inflation pressure from this bill and from the pent-up demand that we're seeing as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic. But I think that's where the Fed is going to get involved. And I don't know, obviously, what they're going to do. But I don't think the Biden administration or congressional Democrats believe that it is their job at the moment to worry too much about inflation, which has been non-existent for so many years, when we are still in the midst of a very serious set of crises.